Hello everyone, welcome to another interesting and informative session of the Analyst brought to you by Vajiram and Ravi. In today's session, we will discuss 7 important articles as featured in the Hindu and Indian Express for your comprehensive understanding of the current affairs explained to you in the easiest language possible. The topics are as follows. From your analysis section, which also provide you the much important avenue to practice daily answer writing, in the first topic, we'll try to understand why Supreme Court had declined the bail to Umar Khalid and Sharjeel Imam, who has been charged under the UAPA Act of 1967. Then in the second topic, we'll try to analyze the discrepancies which prevails in the Prevention of Children Against Sexual Offences Act of 2012. Then from your simplified section, we'll take up 5 news, where we'll not only try to simplify the news for you, but also provide you the much important value addition, keeping in mind the approaching prelims 2026. So, stay tuned. The Supreme Court on January 5 has actually declined to grant bail to activist Umar Khalid and Sharjeel Imam, who has been associated with the Delhi riots which took place in 2020 and shook the capital in association with the passing of Citizenship Amendment Act of 2019 as well as the concept of National Register of Citizens. And these activists have been charged under the provisions of Unlawful Activity Prevention Act of 1967, which forms an integral component of your GS2 paper under the larger theme of government policies and its intervention. So keep this in mind that while denying the bail, the Supreme Court at the same point of time also upheld that how the citizens of our country indeed have right to protest as well as have right to make speeches to sensitize the people as an integral part of under Article 19 of the Constitution, which provides for freedom of speech and expression. But at the same point of time, such speeches shall not be provocative in the nature in a way that they end up disrupting the public order or, for example, infringing the life, the property, and thus kind of violating the Article 21, that is right to dignified life of an individual. Thus, as per the Supreme Court ruling, there shall be a healthy balance between Article 19 and Article 21 of the Constitution, and for that purpose, we can actually create some legal mechanisms to curb down the absolute freedom of speech and expression. One such legal mechanism is Unlawful Activity Prevention Act of 1967. So I hope that you people are aware that how our country was actually colonized from the year of 1757 to 1947. Surprise, surprise. So the Britishers at that point of time had one primary objective. They actually wanted to curb down the dissenting voice which was coming from the sons of the soil. So, to do that, they actually brought the Vernacular Press Act of 1878, which was passed under the Viceroyalty of Lord Lytton, who was Viceroy from 1876 to 1880. The Vernacular Press Act basically stated that if there exists any newspaper which is publishing anything which is anti-British in the nature, and thus enticing the people against the government of the day, then such vernacular language people, vernacular language basically implies that any language which is not English and thus not understandable by Lytton. So any such vernacular newspaper will be first and foremost will be banned, and the printing press will be confiscated on the order of the district magistrate, and there lies no appeal against such order of the district magistrate. Then within the awake of the kind of the Swadeshi movement which was taking place from 1905 to 1907, they brought a Criminal Law Amendment Act of 1908, under which they stated that they were going to basically curb down any, keep this in mind, unlawful associations in the country, which are basically kind of indulging in revolutionary activities and thus kind of propagating anti-British feelings among the people. Associations such as, for example, Gadar Party. Keep this in mind that Gadar Party, in their first edition of the newspaper Gadar, they had published that how at that point of time the population of the country was 24 crore. They said that these 24 crore people are actually being governed by 79,614 officers, out of which only 38,548 officers are Europeans. तो सोच लो क्या करना है फिर. On the very same line, the Britishers brought more acts, like for example Seditious Meeting Act and Defence of India Act 1915, now in the backdrop of the World War I which was taking place. The draconian provisions of these acts were copy and pasted in the Rowlatt Act of 1919, which basically provided, keep this in mind, that any person can be charged and kept behind the walls even without any warrant for a period of 2 years. And thus this act was actually termed as Black Act by Gandhi, in response to which he launched his Satyagraha Sabha. So when our country ultimately got independent and our constitution was adopted on 26th of November 1949, the forefathers of our constitutions, who were majorly at the receiving end of such draconian provisions and curbing down of freedom of speech and expression, they ensured two things. First, the idea of freedom of speech and expression was actually included as a fundamental right under Part 3 of the Constitution. The second was that they actually ensured that no such act which gives such an overarching power to the government, no such act was enacted. Now the question which shall arise in your mind should be that then what were the issues or the events which actually kind of forced the government of India to brought such an act in the year of 1967? Well, there were various internal security challenges which we faced within the 20 years or 2 decades of our freedom. First and foremost was the rise of separatist movement, which actually kind of demanded for the kind of the bifurcation of our Indian state, right? Such as, for example, the demand of Dravid Nadu by Periyar or E.V. Ramaswamy, leading to the formation of DMK party in the year of 1949, or the demand of Punjabi Suba movement, which ultimately transitioned or led to the bifurcation of Punjab in the year of 1966 with the creation of Haryana as a state. Then there were also the role of foreign powers which were actually enticing such anti-India feelings among our people, such as, for example, during the India-China War of 1962, China basically claimed its demand on Tawang or Northeastern Frontier Agency or modern day Arunachal Pradesh. Now imagine that our country is fighting a war with another nation, that is China. And at that point of time, there are certain people in our country who are using freedom of speech and expression to actually demand for such separatist movement or spreading such separatist tendencies. Don't you think the government of the day will try to bring certain act to actually regulate such people? Further need was felt because of the rising insurgency in the northeastern state. For example, for the formation of the Nagaland National Council, which actually demanded for the regional autonomy, or for example the demands like Greater Nagalim, and they were basically fighting a kind of a guerrilla warfare in the region. Or for example the Naxalbari uprising, which is co-terminus with the rise of the left-wing extremism in our country, where the peasants followed or led by the people like Charu Mazumdar and Kanu Sanyal, who believed in the Mao Zedong's policy of agrarian revolution against the state, actually led up arms against the state. That was the final nail in the coffin. And thus our government of India brought the Unlawful Activity Prevention Act of 1967. Keep this in mind that the first organization to be banned under the provisions of the act was in the year of 1969, and the organization was Communist Party of India Marxist-Leninist. So when we have understood this, let's try to understand what constitutes an unlawful activity under the provisions of the act. The act basically describes that any action of an individual or association which tends to bring cession or secession of Indian territory, or it disclaims or questions our country's sovereignty and integrity, or end up causing any kind of disruption to the harmony or the public order, as it happened in the case of Delhi riots of 2020. Now, my simple question to all of you is, does there exist any legal definition of what constitutes sovereignty of our nation? The answer is no. Does there exist any legal definition for what constitutes the public order to maintain it? The answer is again no. So don't you think by the very virtue of such ambiguity in the definition which exists in the act, it actually ends up providing the government of the day the kind of an over large discriminatory power. So it can basically term any activity as an unlawful activity. That is another argument given by the critique of the act. The 2004 amendment also included for the first time the term terrorism in the provision. And it said that if there is any terrorist activity which is being committed on the soil of the nation, any person associated with it will be charged under the provisions of UAPA Act of 1967. Under the section 3, keep this in mind, only central government can declare any association as unlawful as it was done by the Britishers under the Criminal Law Amendment Act of 1908. And a major provision is that this act applies, or the prosecution under this act applies to both, not only to the citizen but also to the any foreign national. And for that we take example of David Headley. David Headley was a simple tourist, a Pakistani American in citizenship, right? So he basically came to our country as a tourist, and he actually kind of took photos and charted a whole plan for the Lashkar-e-Toiba led 26/11 attack which took place. The government of India says that, let's say for example, there is a tourist who has arrived in our country and is basically vlogging for his Instagram account. And through his vlogs, he is basically kind of exposing all the strategic locations of our country, ultimately leading to a kind of a future terrorist activity. How we are actually going to define such a kind of an act in this specific act which we have kind of created? And that is why the government says that such ambiguity actually help us to deal with such issues. Keep this in mind that Lashkar-e-Toiba is one of the banned organizations which is listed in the first schedule, along with CPI-ML, SIMI, Jaish-e-Mohammed, etc. Now, there are certain other amendments which we have done to the act, and certain more provisions has been added. One of them is that the provision of money laundering is now a crime under the UAPA Act of 1967. Keep this in mind that we did that. Why? Because we actually became the 34th member of the Financial Action Task Force back in the year of 2010. So, right now it has 40 members. 38 of them are countries like our country. 2 of them are regional associations, for like example European Commission, or for example your Gulf Cooperation Council. So this Financial Action Task Force is actually a kind of an intergovernmental body which was established by the G7 countries back in the year of 1989, where it majorly aims to curb down the money laundering and hawala channels. So let's say for example, there was some money, black money, which was transferred from Pakistan and it was actually sent to the Myanmar. From Myanmar, this money was actually kind of again sent to various sources in our country, and thus various kind of riots or terrorist activity was funded. The idea is that if the authorities in Myanmar were very well aware about such illicit transfer of money which is taking place and they did not took any action, then all the members of the Financial Action Task Force are actually going to put economic sanctions on Myanmar, thus kind of forcing them to stop acting as a platform for such illicit transfer of money. If Myanmar does not take any action at all, then such country can also be blacklisted. So the countries with serious strategic deficiencies in countering money laundering and terrorist financing, right now it actually includes, for example, Myanmar, North Korea as well as Iran. So because we became the member of Financial Action Task Force back in the year of 2010, we amended the Unlawful Activity Prevention Act of 1967 in the year of 2013 to actually include money laundering as one of the offences, under which we can prosecute not only an individual but also organizations who are involved in such money laundering or who have any established link with any kind of terrorist grouping. And we can actually ban such organization from having any kind of functions in our territory for at least a period of 5 years, after which a review will take place, and for that a special committee will be created comprising of High Court judges. Now, what are the investigation and the enforcement mechanisms under the UAPA Act? Remember them for your prelims examination. First and foremost is section 43A to 43F, which actually provides a special power to National Investigation Agency and State Police. So keep this in mind. NIA is a statutory body which was created under NIA Act of 2008 against the wake of the 26/11 attacks on Mumbai itself. So Like CBI, does NIA is also required to first go and take a state government permission? So let's say to go to Maharashtra, that can we investigate this 26/11 attack which has taken place? The answer is no. NIA can take over cases even without the state government consent. And it can also seize the property of accused under the section 25 of the act. Then there are certain specific arrest and the bail provisions, under which NIA can actually detain a person for 180 days without filing a charge sheet. Now read this provision very carefully. So, under the normal provisions of Bharatiya Nagrik Suraksha Samhita of 2023, let's say there is a person who has been accused of committing a crime. So, the police will investigate the case for 1 day. And if the police is unable to file the charge sheet or provide that yes indeed we have found kind of good amount of evidence which actually proves that yes indeed this accused itself has committed the crime, if the police is unable to do that in 1 day, then the judicial magistrate has power to actually send this person for a police custody of maximum 15 days, after which the police will have to file a charge sheet. But ultimately whether the accused is going to be convicted or not, that is the decision of the court. In this particular case, NIA can actually obtain a person without filing any charge sheet at all or without order of judicial magistrate for at least 180 days, that is almost 6 months. The section 43D clause 5 specifically says that bail can be denied even if prima facie case exists. So even if NIA kind of develops a suspicion on you that you have committed a terrorist act, then you are going to be arrested on that prima facie basis itself, and thus courts have very limited power to grant the bail. The penalty which has been kept is the highest, and that is the capital punishment. And then there is a specific tribunal which will be created under section 5, which will be headed by a high court judge to actually review that whether you should be arrested further or should be kept in the custody further after 6 months, or if there is an association which has been banned, so whether the kind of the ban shall be lifted or not, and that will be decided by this special tribunal. Then under the amendments of which we brought in the year of 2019, now the bill or the act also empowers the government to designate individuals as terrorists. Under the act, an investigating officer must obtain prior approval of the DGP to seize properties that may be connected with terrorism. If the officer of NIA, the approval of Director General is actually mandatory. Under the Act, the investigation of cases may be conducted by the officers of the rank of DSP or ACP, and even the officers of NIA of the rank of Inspector can also now investigate the cases. So what are the issues which the critics keep on highlighting with such draconian law? The first and foremost is a provision which is already understood by you, and that is the ambiguity which prevails in the law. So the law basically defines the terrorist activity under section 50, right? It says that any such act which basically infringe or violate or endangers the security, the sovereignty or the economic security of the country, that will be held as a terrorist activity. Now, don't you think that such ambiguity which prevails in the law obviously transitions to what? The broad and overarching provisions which can actually end up crippling the voice of reason itself. Because at the end of the day, how you will decide that any criticism which is being made by a person is whether against the government of India or the nation? To understand this in a simple manner, let's take an example. Let's say as a student, you people are actually protesting on a national highway. What you are protesting at? These days people are protesting against anything. But let's say you have some meaningful cause. You are basically protesting against the discrepancies which lies in the functioning of the state government examination, where there is repeated delays which are taking place in state PSC, and you are protesting against that. For that purpose, you have blocked a section of national highway. Why? Because you actually try to bring the media attention, right? You want your grievances to be heard and discussed by a large section of society. That's why you have done this. The government says that this national highway basically act as an important component of the logistic of the country. and act as an important platform for the exchange of some very essential horticulture crop. And thus, by committing this act, you have actually kind of committed a terrorist activity under section 15 of the of this particular act. Thus, don't you think that now you will be charged under the UAPA and now you will be kept 6 months behind the bar, and the police is not, or the NIA is not even required to file a charge sheet against you. Keep this in mind that, let's say, in reality you did not even kind of put a protest on the national highway, you did not even blocked it. You were only talking about it, and on a mere suspicion of that, the NIA, even though the act has not been committed, can actually do a preemptive arrest or detention. So they can put you behind the bar just for thinking that you are going to block the national highway, because that would have impacted the economic security. Thus, by the very nature itself, the act stands antithetical to the ordinary criminal laws, because it keeps higher bar for granting the bail. So in the normal provision, it is actually, the law is that you are innocent until you are proven guilty, but in this particular case, under UAPA, you are guilty until proven innocent. At the same point of time, if you see, the provisions for the bail is actually quite stringent. So bail is the norm, is not in this case. And many of the time it actually leads to the infringement of the human rights, like for example Article 14, right to equality, or Article 21, right to dignified life, as it happened in the case of G. Chakrabarti case as well, where G. Chakrabarti, an activist, was actually put behind the bar for almost 7 years, and then he was released as he was not convicted. So he basically ended up wasting 7 years of his most formative phase of life behind the bar for a mere suspicion. Thus, many of the time it actually leads to low conviction rate as well. Just look at the headings. Half of the UAPA investigations are actually pending for more than 3 years. Just look at the share of UAPA cases between 2019 and 2022 whose investigations have been pending for more than 3 years. Just look at the rising number. Look at this chart which shows the number of persons who are arrested under UAPA, the person charge sheeted, discharged, acquitted and convicted. These were the people who were arrested, the people against whom the NIA filed the charge sheet. The ultimately convicted are 315 out of 11,500 people in the span of 5 years. But in this case, the Supreme Court actually kind of applied a mechanism of hierarchy of roles to actually provide the bail. So this is a new concept, let's try to understand that. So the court held that the constitutional guarantee of personal liberty is not absolute, and it remains subject to the stringent bail regime which is prescribed under the Unlawful Activity Prevention Act. The court held that prosecutorial evidence placed Mr. Khalid and Mr. Imam on a qualitatively different footing from the other accused, warranting a distinct assessment of the hierarchy of participation. So it observed that how these two people, they did not stand on equal footing in terms of culpability, since they were the ideological drivers who allegedly devised the strategy of converting the protest of CAA to disruptive road blockades aimed at paralyzing the national capital, and that's why we took the example of an highway. So what are the different judgments related of the Supreme Court related to UAPA? First is your Bal Chand case of 1978, which establishes that bail is the rule and jail is the exception. But then Supreme Court basically kind of reverted this judgment in Union of India versus K. Najib case 2021. It has been highlighted in the today's article as well, where Supreme Court specifically held that bail under UAPA is an exception but shall be balanced by speedy trial. And that's what the Supreme Court is suggesting here also, that we need to identify whether these people were directly involved in the riots or not, and that shall be done in the speedy basis, but we are not going to give bail to them. In V. Gonzalez case of 2023, the Supreme Court held that there shall be surface analysis of probative values of accused plea is necessary. So we need to get into that. If there is an argument which is being made by the accused that no, I was not there, we need to investigate that also in utmost detail. And in Gurvinder Singh case 2024, the Supreme Court held that bail is the exception, jail is going to be the rule under the UAPA. So there are several committees, there are several think tanks who have provided a kind of a way forward for you to write in the mains examination. First is Law Commission of India Report 2018, which said if prima facie no case exists under the section 43 clause D, the bail shall be provided by the court if you are not able to link it directly with the act of terrorism. Second, Justice AP Shah Committee 2010, which actually suggested to repeal the whole Article 43D clause 5 itself and then precisely define the terrorist act. The NIA Review Committee of 2018, which provided for a robust protection of the accused, which shall be done and no infringement of their human rights shall be committed. And on the same line, the Vidhi Center for Legal Policy has suggested to introduce pre and post facto judicial and independent oversight for the application of the UAPA provisions. Keep these particular suggestions in your mind while you are attempting this question, and we move forward to the next news. The Supreme Court has asked the government to introduce a Romeo-Juliet clause in the Protection of Children from Sexual Offences Act 2012 to actually exempt the genuine adolescent relationships from the criminal prosecution by their families. What is this Romeo-Juliet clause? Why the Supreme Court is actually directing the government of the day to include this in the provisions of POCSO Act? We'll try to learn all of them one by one under your GS1 paper's theme of social issues, but before that, let's first try to understand the evolution of the POCSO Act of 2012. So before the application of POCSO, any such sexual abuse against a children was actually being covered under the provisions of Indian Penal Code of 1860, which had certain problems, like for example, it was gender specific. So it did not included any kind of sexual abuse which was being committed against a boy. It only mentioned girl. Second, it did not recognize many forms of sexual abuse, such as for example, non-penetrative sexual assault. Then at that point of time, there existed different laws made by the government which actually prescribe different age limit. For example, if we consider Right to Education Act of 2009, according to it, it says that the government of India shall provide free and compulsory education to the children below the age of 14 years. So if we refer to this act, the age of the children would be 14 years and any person above the age of 14 would be considered as grown men or women. But the government of India had already signed and ratified the UN Convention on the Right of Child, UNCRC 1989. We ratified it in the year of 92. And a specific section 34 of this particular UN convention actually lays down where it covers all type of sexual assault, even the non-penetrative ones, as well as it also provided a uniform age of below 18 years to be considered as children. Then there was a shocking revelation which was actually made by the study of Ministry of Women and Child Development in the year of 2007. Which actually stated that how more than 50% of the children in our country at that point of time had actually faced one or other form of sexual abuse. Thus, the government was forced to actually bring the POCSO Act of 2012, which recognized the gaps in the existing criminal laws, and thus made it more child-centric and gender-neutral framework, in the sense that it also included any kind of sexual abuse being committed against a boy within the ambit of the act. It also included all kind of sexual offences against the children, the penetrative and the non-penetrative one. And thus, don't you think the POCSO Act as a kind of a strong pillar to strengthen the ultimate demographic dividend of India, which is the future of the country? If we are going to become Viksit Bharat, it is obviously going to be because of the healthy children of today. But the point is that the act, when it was being laid down, it actually provided for some very stringent measures. So basically, try to understand this concept. We do have very strict traffic rules also, right? Everywhere we have traffic lights to be followed. In a similar fashion, this particular act also had some stringent provisions, like for example, hands off our children. The section 2 clause D actually described child as any person below the 18 years of age. Section 3 actually defines penetrative sexual assault, which includes penile, oral, etc. object based. Section 7 defines a sexual assault. a sexual assault which can even be non-penetrative in the nature. So it basically describes any kind of physical touch which has been maintained with the intent of having some kind of sexual perversion. So that has been defined as well. Section 19 basically creates a responsibility to report the offense by the teacher, by the family member, by the brother, cousins, etc. Or even, let's say, for example, if there are NGOs which are working for the welfare of children at the grassroots level, like for example there is your cry, if they find out that there is a children who has been kind of suffering from any kind of sexual abuse, they find it out, then it is kind of mandatory for them to report. Otherwise, under section 21 there will take place a punishment for the failure to report. Then we need to punish the guilty. Section 24 says child statement can be recorded at a residence or the place of choice. Section 26, medical examination in the presence of parent or a trusted person. Section 33, establishment of special court for kind of the faster adjudication. Then section 29, exception to the presumption of innocence. So keep this in mind that as we were discussing in the last topic also, that how in the normal consideration we consider that a person is innocent unless until proven guilty, but the section 29 of POCSO says that when a person is prosecuted for committing an offense of sexual assault against a minor, then the special court trying the case shall presume that the accused is guilty unless and until proven innocent. And the penalty which we have set, the highest, is the death penalty. Even if you will go in this particular case also under POCSO to ask for bail, then there are certain layers on which consideration of which the bail will be ultimately provided to you. For example, the age of the minor victim. Younger the victim, more heinous the offense. Second, age of the accused. Older the accused, more heinous the offense considered. Third, if the age difference is actually quite more, then the element of perversion in the offense alleged will be considered more as well, and thus the bail can be completely denied. Now recall how we link it with the traffic rules which we have established. There are traffic lights which exist. But does it stop the traffic violation or bypassing of such traffic light? The answer is no. So even despite we have such stringent provision to kind of protect the sexual abuse against the children, against the future of our country, even then the such issues are keep on taking place, and that is what we term as silent suffering. For that, we refer to the NCRB Crime in India 2023 report, which tells that how in the year of 2023, 1.7 lakh cases of crime against children were registered, which was actually a kind of a hike of 9.2%. In 2022, there was 36 cases per 1 lakh child population of crime. Now it has actually gone up to 39 cases per 1 lakh child population. 38% of all of this crime which was committed against the children, of this 1.7 lakh, 38% of them was actually registered under the POCSO Act. There might be so many people who might not be even going and registering their cases or raising their voice. After that 38%, and 762 victims were actually aged below 6 years. Sometimes I wonder where we are actually heading as a society. So obviously there are no excuse which can be given for such a level of perversion, but there are some sociological theories which we can talk about, and that is the embedded socio-cultural malice. First is the labeling theory. The labeling theory basically states that how there lies a reluctance to name and acknowledge the abuse. The reason for that is that the concept which we have, char log kya kahenge, right? The kind of a ingrained training we have, where instead of looking for the kind of the solutions to the grievances which we have faced, the first thought which comes in our mind is the shame which we are going to face in the society. This was exactly the thing which was also highlighted by the Chief Justice of India, where he said that how there might be so many cases which will be taking place at the grassroots level, but they are never reported because of this labeling theory, losing the shame. Or for example, worrying about the future of the children. What will happen if this particular case gets infamous, if so many people starts talking about it, especially if the girl is involved. For example, the same actually happened in the Nainital case 2025 itself, where there was a 73-year-old man who sexually assaulted a 12-year-old girl, and that led to the situation of communal riots in Nainital. Then there is social learning theory, where certain authoritative figures, they abuse the trust, normalizing exploitative dynamics. So obviously being driven from the deep-rooted patriarchal and gender power structure which prevail, where there are certain men who actually keeps them at such a high pedestal thanks to the patriarchal norms, where they consider that it is actually their right to treat a person in whichever they want. That was also the case which was highlighted by the Madras High Court, where it stated that how 96% of the cases which they are actually hearing on daily basis against the crime which has been committed against the children, 96% of them was actually close relative of the victims. Leading to what? Leading to the social learning theory, where such authoritative figures at home, they actually end up sexually exploiting such innocent children, being driven from such patriarchal norms, right? Third is the lack of symbolic interactionism, where the kind of the taboo which we have created in our society against the concept of sex, right? Even though it is our country, where for example Kam Sutra was written by Vatsyayana, a book which talks about various kind of love relationships. In the very same country right now, talking on the matter of sexual orientation, the concept of good touch and bad touch has become a taboo. And that basically leads to the kind of this young children being completely unaware about what a bad touch is. Leading to what? 1 in 5 girls and 1 in 20 boys is a victim of child sexual abuse. Almost 20% adult women recall that how they actually experienced a sexual assault in their childhood. 3 out of 4 adolescents have been sexually assaulted, were actually the victimized by someone they knew or close to their family. And what it transpires to, what it leads to. So just imagine that for a person whose human rights, right, has been assaulted or violated at such an early formative phase of their thought process, the development of their thought process, they actually start inculcating a kind of a stress response, where in fear, anxiety, anger, depression, their any response to any stress kind of a situation actually becomes of aggression, hostility, or they start indulging in substance abuse. Thus, they start facing a concept which we call as PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. Thus, they actually end up contradicting the Karl Marx theory. Karl Marx famously said that man is a social animal. But these victims of sexual abuse at such an early formative phase of their life, they have actually end up seeing an animal in a man. And thus, they kind of completely deject themselves from the larger society, thus show having dysfunctional relationship, maladaptive communication skill. Also, they face various problems like fatigue, stress, fibromyalgia, where individual basically faces that person is consistently in fatigue. Don't you think all of these issues is actually going to undermine this person's potential to actually attain higher education and get a skill to get a good job? One event in childhood can have a domino effect on this person's life, ultimately on the conscience of the nation as well. So, beside this, why we have been unable to kind of bring down such cases under the POCSO? There are certain issues. First is the high pendency of cases and low conviction rates. Just look at the number of cases which are being booked under the Protection of Children Act, pending in almost 764 special fast track courts as of 2023. Second is the procedural lapses which takes place when the police is actually going to investigate a particular case, where they do not take adequate samples, where the kind of, let's say for example, because of the pressure of the families or pressure of a kind of a person who is at a high position involved, that ultimately leads to the kind of the breaking of the exact evidence which was taken place. Third, no specific condition to actually prove the recent intercourse, as well as the issues which lies with age determination, and that ultimately leads to the issue of Romeo-Juliet clause, which has been discussed by the Supreme Court. Romeo and Juliet is basically a kind of a tragic love story which was written by William Shakespeare, where there were two star-crossed lovers whose families did not like each other and they lived in Italy. So both of them, they basically end up marrying themselves secretly, but as their families find out the feud which prevails, the kind of the issues and the various domino effect things ultimately lead to these two lovebirds hanging, or let's say committing suicide in a shared sacred tomb. That is exactly the case which has been highlighted by the Supreme Court as well, where nowadays many adolescents who are, let's say for example 16 years of age, they are getting into a kind of a consensual sexual intercourse which might not be approved by their parents. So when they are coming across such kind of a relationship which has been maintained or has been developed naturally, they might have fallen in love at the age of 15 to 16, love has no age, then these parents, as they are non-approvable of such relationship, many of the time they end up forcing either boy or a girl to file a complaint against the other one. So they basically coerce the girl, let's say that I will not give you iPhone 17, you file a complaint against your boyfriend that he has committed a sexual assault, thus ended up kind of jeopardizing the whole career of that boy. This is the thing which was also highlighted by the Bombay High Court, where it said that the age of consent under POCSO is perhaps the highest globally. We need to actually bring it down. So we need to kind of stop such criminalization of the teenage love affair which is taking place in the name of the POCSO Act. Also, many of the time, it's not like that the boys are completely innocent. Many of the time it has been found out that they have actually created certain videos and circulated it on internet, thus violating the right to dignified life of the woman under Article 21 of the Constitution. The Supreme Court actually took a kind of a strict note against that. Section 15 clause 1, which was actually brought in the amendment of 2019 by the government said that any person who is going to store pornographic material in any form involving a child but fails to delete or report will be imprisoned for 3 years. Or if you transmit or display or distribute it, then you will be imprisoned for 4 years. And if you use such child sexual exploitation and abuse material for commercial purposes, then you are going to be held for 5 years. Then the Supreme Court has also provided certain suggestions which you can write as a way forward. First, strict responsibility on social media intermediaries to actually kind of stop such circulation under the Digital Personal Data Protection Act of 2023. To explicitly define such child sexual exploitation and abuse material under the provisions of the Act and kind of upheld them as organized crime. To treat creation of such things including AI generated deepfakes as a real child abuse under POCSO 2012. To actually have forensic labs which are equipped with cutting edge technologies to actually kind of identify and prove the recent intercourse, and ultimately include the offender detail in the national database on sexual offenders. Also, the fast tracks which has been created by the government, they are now actually solving the case with more than 100% disposal rate. So we are also now have started dealing with the backlogs as well. So this is a very good news. Remember it, try to attempt this question, and we move forward to the next news. So the amount of love which is actually shown by UPSC to your facial recognition, I hope you guys have read the recent notification, the same amount of love Trump also have for tariffs. So now the Trump is saying that if there is any country which is dealing with Russian oil imports, it is going to impose a 500% tariff on their products. Thus, there might be a future where we can completely be switching away from the Russian oil imports. And that is the news which we are going to cover. The prevailing low global oil prices mean that if India actually chooses to shift away from importing Russian oil and switches to more oil from the US, the financial impact of this is actually going to be very limited on our economy as per the expert analysis which has been published today in the Hindu. So let's first try to understand the India's crude oil import dependency which we have. As per the Indian Express article published in October 2025, India was 87.9 or 88% dependent on the import of crude oil, and we were importing around 242 million metric ton of crude oil. Our own production capacity is around 2.3 million metric ton, of which the contribution entirely comes from the public sector units, which contributes to 78% of the total production. If we refer to the report by OPEC, it says that how India right now is consuming 5.7 million barrels per day. Keep this in mind that we do not entirely import this crude oil only for our energy utilization, but also we refine such petroleum product and we sell them as well. So it also basically provides a good revenue to our balance of payment. For example, India exports 64 million metric ton of refined petroleum products in the year of 2025. So the today's article says that, let's say for example, India is hugely reliant on its oil import, right? Crude oil, 87% or 88% of our need. Majorly it was coming from 5 countries. So right now Russia is our top oil importer, right? Providing us the most amount of oil. For example, 37%. 20% comes from Iraq, 13% comes from Saudi Arabia, 8% comes from UAE, and remember, USA right now is the 5th largest oil supplying country to us, but its share is very meager, and that is only 3.2%. The article today tells us that even if we want to bring USA from 5th to 1st, it is not going to be a huge economic loss for us. Let's try to decode that. So the article says that, see, the price of Russian oil is approximately $482 per ton. But at the same point of time, this Russian oil which is coming to our country, it contains higher sulfur content as per Global Trade Research Institute. So if it has a higher sulfur content, if we want to use this oil to refine it and to sell it to other countries, the refining of such high sulfur content also involves a lot of input cost. So our total profit margin to the petroleum products which we are refining and selling outside, that is very low. Second is the price of Trump's oil, that is $523 per ton. But then GTRI says that no, it is of very superior quality, so we do not need that much of refining. So if we start buying from USA, the cost is a bit high, but at the same point of time, if we refine it, the input cost will be lower considering it has a lower sulfur content, and thus our profit margin over a period of time will increase. So with that, we can actually bring it to kind of an equilibrium price. Similarly, the average cost, if we add both of them and divide by 2, it comes to $498 per ton. So let's say earlier the Russia was giving us a discount of around $16 right now. But back in the year of 2022, the discount was almost $40. So even the Russian discount has kind of declined. So right now if we start dealing with USA, it is going to be completely manageable by us for the short run and maybe profitable in the long run. The second point is that, but it is surely going to impact the trade tangent between India and Russia. Keep this in mind that the bilateral trade, we have envisaged to increase our bilateral trade to Russia to $100 billion by 2030 and bilateral investment to $50 billion by 2025. Till the year of 2025, right now, when the Vladimir Putin was coming and our Prime Minister was going to hug him, till that point the bilateral trade existed around $68.7 billion, which was the all-time high, out of which 88% comes from the import of the crude oil. Keep this in your mind, 88%. Then the Russia's share in our oil basket was meager 2% in 2020 and it increased to 37% in 2025. But now if we start deviating away from Russia, don't you think it is going to create a problem in the relations which we have developed over a period of time? The point is that actually our economists were quite far ahead, that they predicted such kind of a tariff imposition, and we had already started cutting down our import from Russian oil by 38% in October 2025. That was the sharpest so far. Why? Because our country had started citing that out of this $68 billion trade which we are doing with Russia, we have a trade deficit of $61 billion. So the Russia is only buying $7 billion product of ours, and in return of that it is selling $61 billion of its product. Keep this in mind that almost 88% of this $61 billion sale is nothing but oil. So don't you think we also over a period of time started becoming overtly reliant on our energy security on Russia? At the same point of time, our companies did not got the adequate opportunity to actually kind of penetrate the service sector in the Russia's market. And now these USA sanctions which are going to be imposed, we will be required to pay much more on the Russian oil which we are importing. Our currency might depreciate further. At the same point of time, the kind of the profit which we were having with the export which we were doing to USA, that is going to be hampered as well. Another major problem was that India and Russia was actually trying to do de-dollarization, where we said that okay, we are going to maintain a rupee and a ruble trade. So what started happening that Russia, let's say for example, is kind of exporting $61 billion of oil to us. For that we started paying in rupee, right? So for example, our money on deposit at your bank account, right? So account which is held by a foreign bank in domestic currency at our bank, and that is your Vostro account. So our money was being held by the Russian companies. But what they will do with it? Because anyway, the import which they are having from India is only $7 billion. Let's say we minus that. What they will do with the remaining 54 billion rupees which they have got, right? So that was another complaint. So we again shifted to the dollar. And if the dollar appreciates and our currency depreciates, don't you think for the same Russian oil, we are actually paying much more money now? Thus, the article today suggests that how the India's energy requirement is going to increase exponentially, and thus this is the time where we need to focus on renewable energy and diversify our energy basket. So as per the International Energy Agency, our country's energy demand is going to double by 2047, and by the year of 2047, the world's 1/4 incremental energy demand will come from our country. Right now itself, we are the third largest energy consumer and fourth largest liquefied natural gas importer. Also, if you guys can recall the Economic Survey 2025, it is stated that how we need to create 78.5 lakh non-farm jobs. Similarly, the Confederation of Indian Industry estimates suggest that how we are going to add 133 million plus people to our working age population in the span of next 10 to 15 years. So yes, indeed, we are trying to diversify our energy basket. We have taken a Panchamrit target. Our non-fossil energy capacity has actually increased from 29.5% to 51% share right now. And for that purpose, we have also kind of launched various schemes like International Solar Alliance, Pradhan Mantri Surya Ghar Muft Bijli Yojana, to increase nuclear power capacity tenfold by 2047, for which we have basically passed a new act also, where we are actually kind of providing privatization in the nuclear sector, as well as the green hydrogen mission, under which we are going to produce 5 million metric ton of green hydrogen by the year of 2030. But the idea is that we should also try to look at the global best practices which are taking place across the world. One of them is, for example, this very innovative method which I found, and that is the piezoelectric method which is being used by Japan, where they are basically creating the road pavements, right, which uses your mechanical and kinetic energy. So when you walk on it, the kinetic energy basically kind of compresses the floor, and because of this movement, they are actually using this kinetic energy to create renewable energy. Then we can actually create energy from waste as well, the Govardhan scheme, etc. So basically we should also need to diversify our energy basket, right? I know some of you may will argue that yes sir, we also could have used this kinetic energy, this piezoelectric method which is being utilized by Japan. We only have one problem, and that is we do not have roads. On that note, we move forward to the next news, where we are going to read about a very important temple which has featured in the news today, and that is Somnath temple. where our Honorable Prime Minister is actually visiting Gujarat for 3 days, and during which he is going to participate in several events including the Somnath Swabhiman Parv and the vibrant Gujarat Regional Conference in Rajkot. Also, he will take part in Shaur Yatra, which will be organized to honor those who laid down their lives defending the Somnath temple. So, what is the history of Somnath temple? Somnath temple, which is at Prabhas Patan in Gujarat, right, where we also have a kind of a ancient Indus Valley civilization site. It is considered to be the first Jyotirling of Shivji out of 12 which we have in the country, and all of them have been listed here for you in the specific states, because one specific year in prelims examination they ask about it. Second, the Somnath Mandir has also been mentioned in Mahabharat as well as Bhagavad Puran. And for the first time, it was actually commissioned by a Gurjara Pratihara king Nag Bhatt II, who ruled from 805 to 833 C. Then it was actually completed by a Solanki king who was Mulraj in 1997 C. Then came Mahmud Ghazni in the search of wealth, in the search of gold, and ended up plundering the Somnath temple. It is believed that there were 50 to 60,000 residents in the region of Prabhas Patan at that point of time, who actually told Mahmud Ghazni that how we are, like, if you want, you take all the gold from us, and kill us, but do not enter into the sanctum sanctorum of the temple. However, Mahmud Ghazni wanted to be called as the destroyer of the idols or as Boot Shikan, and thus ended up destroying or plundering the Somnath temple in 1026 C. Keep this in mind, you will find it at a very few places, that this temple was again rebuilt in 1169 C by the Chalukya ruler Kumar Pal. However, in 1707 or 1706 approximately, it was again destroyed by Aurangzeb. So post-independence, the order was given for the reconstruction of Somnath temple by Sardar Patel, the deputy prime minister at that point of time, on the request which was made by Mahatma Gandhi. So on 11th of May 1951, the Pran Pratishtha took place by the first president of our country, and that was Rajendra Prasad. So you guys can see the ruined structure of Somnath temple in 1869 and how it has been brought to all of its glory under the specific style of architecture which we called as Nagada architecture. So when we talk about the Nagada architecture which built under the Solanki dynasty, it had certain specific features, like for example, the external walls, where you guys can see the number of projections which accommodate the sharp niches. So for example, there is a shikhar. The shikhar in the Nagada architecture is actually built on the model of Meru Parvat, which are mentioned in the various Puranas, where it is considered that the gods or the Dev basically stands for something which is lightning, that is sleeping at the Meru Parvat. So that's why there exists the Garbhagriha. Garbhagriha is basically the sleeping place of the deity, and just over that we have your shikhar. Now on these shikhars they start creating various other structures to fill it. There are two different type of styles which exist. So for example, if we read in the broader context, three different type of shikhar style are there, right? So your Rekha Prasad is there, right? Your Famsana is there, Vallabhi model is there. In Solanki style, they basically used Rekha Prasad Shikhar. And even under the Rekha Prasad, there were two styles which you need to remember about. The first was this Bhumija style. To understand Bhumija style, it is very simple. Imagine a narcissistic person, right? This person clicks his own picture 4 times, create a wallpaper, right, out of this, and out of this 4 picture, he put it on the wallpaper of his mobile and look at his mobile and says, oh wow, what a handsome man. That is exactly what is Bhumija style of architecture, where they start creating small models of shikhar itself and place it on the shikhar to actually give it a kind of a viewpoint of small Urushingas or heels of the larger Meru Parvat from which the river is flowing down. That is also the model they follow at the Shekhri style, where instead of the models of the temple now, they start creating abodes of small deities. And the very prominent development of it is actually seen in the Kandariya Mahadev Khajuraho temple, which was built by, and that was the question to all of you. Remember who built it, who reconstructed it. Solve this question. Comment your answer and we move forward to the next news, where we are going to quickly learn about the new finding which has been made by the Aditya L1 mission. So the Indian Space and Research Organization ISRO on Saturday said that how this Aditya L1 solar mission had provided new insights into how a powerful solar storm could actually impact the Earth's magnetic shield. The most severe effect occurred during the impact of the turbulent region of the solar storm, which you guys can see here. And this Aditya L1 which has been placed here at the Lagrange point. Lagrange points are the points between two celestial bodies where the gravitational force of these two celestial bodies, they basically kind of equal out, and thus you can place your, let's say, satellite right there, and thus it will require less amount of fuel. So this is the entire structure of the sun. You guys can see here the corona. The corona, which is the kind of the outermost layer, and it is believed, let's say for example, that if there is a sun, so this is where all the radiation, nuclear fission, fusion, all of that is taking place here. So it is obvious that the highest temperature which we will find in the sun has to be in this radiative zone or in the sun's core. But there is a paradox that corona is actually considered to be the more warmer in comparison to the core zone of the sun, where the ionized elements within the corona, they glow in the X-ray and extreme ultraviolet wavelengths are released from it. So NASA's instruments can actually image the sun's corona at these higher energies since the photosphere is quite dim in this wavelength. So from this coronosphere, there was a coronal mass ejection which took place, and that was the large scale eruption of plasma releasing a lot of magnetic energy, which is obviously going to impact the magnetic pole of Earth as well. And these coronal mass ejection is actually placed in several categories of B, C, M, X. X is the highest, and that was what was experienced by Aditya L1 as well. The NASA's kind of the prediction says that how there is an increasing solar activity which takes place every 11 years, and that was find out with Living with the Star program which was launched by NASA. So what is going to be the impact of this coronal mass ejection of the sun as per the article today? These solar flare protons are obviously going to hamper the GPS signal. So all the Zomato and Swiggy delivery which you guys are having, that can get impacted. The radiation will also have impact on the aviation as well as the communication. So the flight disturbances can take place. It can also damage the spacecraft electronic, or geomagnetically induced current in the power systems can take place. So power disruption can be caused. It can also affect the submarine cables as well. And this was exactly the question which UPSC asked 1 year as well. Try to attempt it. Also, when these coronal mass ejection kind of interact with the magnetic shield of the Earth, it actually creates this aurora borealis, and kind of the various kind of natures of auroras, which was also appeared in your mains examination as well, right? So when, let's say for example, the people who were living in the region of Norway, Finland, the ancient Vikings, when they saw this kind of the auroras which are taking place, they did not had any answer. Right? They were unaware about the geomagnetism of the Earth at that point of time, and that's why they created the stories of Thor and Odin. Odin, who is actually believed to ride on the Earth using these auroras, right? Also, just read about the specific payloads of the Aditya L1 as well, right? And we move forward to the next news, where we are going to study very quickly about a kind of a Kathputli or a puppetry which prevails in the region of Jaipur. Today's article highlights that how in the maze of narrow lanes in the pink city of Jaipur lies a Kathputli Nagar, where stories are not written but carved, stitched and brought to life with strings, and thus it is a kind of a string based puppetry. Keep this in mind. Inside the cramped homes stacked close together, men and women, they sit on the floor shaping small wooden faces, painting bold eyes and sewing various kind of vibrant costumes. And these puppets are what is known as Kathputli, one of the Rajasthan's oldest folk art forms. The name comes from Kath, that is wood, and Putli, that is doll, reflecting their simple yet effective construction. Historically, these Kathputli performances were actually used by the traveling performers to narrate the tale of Rajput kings, brave warriors, folk heroes, etc. Again, who was the ruler who founded this city of Jaipur called as Pink City now? The ruler was Savai Jai Singh II, very important person for your prelims examination, who was the ruler of Amber and established Jaipur in 1733. He is considered to be the first Hindu ruler in centuries to actually perform ancient Vedic ceremonies. He abolished the practice of sati and also took steps to curb down extravagant exemption on the weddings which were taking place as well as the dowry. Also, considering he had a profound interest in astronomy, he wrote a book called as J.J. Muhammad Shai on astronomical observation, created astronomical observatories or Jantar Mantar at various parts of the country, and that is the question today. Also, he translated the Euclid's work on geometry as well as the Napier work on logarithm and translated them into Sanskrit. These are the different types of puppetry. Like for example, Tholu Bamlatta, which is a shadow puppetry which we find at Andhra and Pradesh, where we have the stories of Ramayana and Mahabharata played for us. Or for example, string puppetries like Kathputli in Rajasthan, Goembatta in Karnataka, Bomlattam in Tamil Nadu and Kundhei in Odisha. Shadow puppetry like Ravan Chaya, which you guys can see here, Toglu Gombetta and Tholu Bomlatta. Glove puppetry, that is Parakuthu in Kerala, and wrought puppetry like for example Putul Nautch in West Bengal and Yampuri in Bihar. Considering a prominent article has featured today in the newspaper, keep learning this puppetry for your prelims examination for sure, and we move forward to the last news, where we are going to quickly learn about the Chief Election Commissioner and why. Because raising the issue of hearing notices under special intensive revision exercise, the Chief Minister of West Bengal, who is quite frequently in the news these days, has written a letter to the Chief Election Commissioner, alleging the harassment of common citizens as well as eminent individuals alike. For example, the Nobel laureate Amartya Sen was actually also called to prove whether he is a citizen of India or not. Thus, the office of Election Commissioner is repeatedly in the news. Keep this in mind that how it is a constitutional office under Article 324, where the Election Commission has the responsibility to conduct elections for Parliament, State, President and Vice President. It consists of Chief Election Commissioner and 2 other election commissioners, and all of them are appointed by the President of India, where they have a specific tenure, that is 6 years or until they attain the age of 65 years. Also, considering they form an important bulwark of democracy in our country, our constitution basically provides a kind of an independence of their security of tenure, where they can be removed exactly in the way as the same manner as the judge of Supreme Court, where there shall be an order of president. So first and foremost, there shall be a motion which has to be addressed by each house of the parliament by a special majority, as well as that majority is total membership of house and 2/3 members present and voting. Also, what are the powers of Election Commission? First and foremost, to determine territorial areas of electoral constituencies on the basis of Delimitation Commission Act, to notify dates and schedules of election and scrutinize nomination paper, to actually grant recognition to political parties and allot election symbols to them, as well as to determine the code of conduct during the time of election and appoint officers for inquiring into electoral arrangements. Then there are some issues which you need to know about from the perspective of prelims this time. One is, Constitution does not prescribe any qualification for them. The term of the election commissioner has not been specified in the Constitution, and any retiring election commissioner is not or can be further appointed by the government of India, so he is not barred that no, you cannot hold any political office now. Keep all of these facts in your mind. And with this, we have reached to the end of our discussion today. We will meet in a very interesting discussion very soon. Till then, all the very best for your preparation and thank you.